Basically, the Point Boy started by Alder and myself getting together in the basement on Ann Street in Fells Point.
I met Jimmy Hammonds through a mutual friend.
Jimmy Fleetwood.
I was looking to get something together, maybe, or just jam with some people.
We played around and messed around with about maybe 8-10 songs.
We just started, well, what do you know? What do you know? And I would just start playing something. Or he said, do you know any of this? Or I don't even remember how a lot of it was, but I'd start playing something and he'd just fill in, and we would just go.
Sat down and came up with a song list of songs that we'd like to do, and before you know it,
let's book a gig. And it's like, we don't have a band, and it didn't matter that we didn't have a band because we didn't like to practice as the Point Boys. That was a reoccurring theme through the whole history.
I've been playing a little bit with a guy named Mick Ayers in a band called Triple X, just Al, myself, and him. And we recruited him, brought him in.
And we started off, the band was called Triple X. I believe that was, I don't know if that was Al or Jimmy's idea. I believe it was Al's.
Got a guitar player, Mick Ayers, and I don't even remember where Mick came from.
I answered an ad in the paper.
At first I was playing keyboards and singing, and Jimmy was playing drums, and we had another guy named Charlie. We were some kind of organized chaos called like Triple X or something like that.
I think they were looking for a bass player. So I answered the ad and went down to Jimmy's house.
Mick Ayers was cool. He would play really loud and he would sing really loud. He didn't even need a microphone. He just had this belting voice.
I guess the first rehearsal we played on like a Tuesday, and then we played again on maybe Wednesday or Thursday night, and by Monday, the following Monday, we were out at the 8x10 doing our first live performance together.
Next thing I know, Mark Rybczynski was brought in by Al.
I called a friend of mine, Mark Rybczynski.
Al and I met in Holy Rosary in the 6th grade.
We used to talk about the Beatles.
He liked the Beatles, and so did I, and it didn't seem like anyone else in class seemed to understand that kind of music.
And he was playing keyboards.
One day called me and just said, can you, or would you be interested in doing some music with this guy Jim I know down the street, and I know this guitar player who's been playing in Fells Point, and it was going to be, the three of us was working, and we'd like to throw you in there. I said, great. Not only can I provide the keyboards, I said I got a lot of practice space in my parents' house, and they didn't seem to mind because the house was so big. So it was a lot of fun.
But that was kind of ground zero of the Point Boys right there. It was Jimmy, Al, Mark, and myself.
And then we just kept, we would practice and we just book gigs. Being on stage was what was important. Rehearsal wasn't. Getting the songs right wasn't. The lyrics I would just make up as we go along, most of them.
But even when we sounded bad, we were entertaining.
The early Point Boys taught me something about working in a rock and roll band. I'd never done that before. And even though I played jazz in college, this was something different.
Are you familiar with Beta Fish? Because that's basically mine and Nick's relationship. We kind of were at each other's throat with invisible knives all the time.
I mean, they'd hit heads all the time. He'd be yelling, Jimmy'd be yelling.
Jim and Mick were that typical oil and water.
That was probably the self-entertaining thing of the band. Needless to say, we were entertainers and we entertained the crowd, but I think what entertained the band itself, at least Al and Mark, was just watching the kind of sibling rivalry between Jimmy and I.
Mick was always the type of person that showed up late after the equipment was set up, and he left early before the equipment had to be torn down.
The thing about Jimmy is he could be a pretty good player when he feels like playing. But it didn't seem to take much to get him in the mood where he didn't feel like playing, or he just had a, bug up his ass about, this or that. And then I would get on him about speeding up and slowing down and be cold blunt sometimes about criticisms. I mean, I didn't pull any punches or watch my words.
I would have to say that it would make one heck of a MTV celebrity death match.
I think it was just something where there were two people that just really weren't supposed to be together. I think it's the best way to describe it.
So I don't even remember doing this, but I remember the story. Jimmy tells me things that I've done that I really don't recall, may have blocked them out. that I went in the back in that door and like cut some lamb meat for gyros they make all the time. I cut the lamb meat and was eating it, but there was a monitor there and you could see in the kitchen. So he said he saw me eating, lamb meat, and I came back, sat down, everyone played.
The beginning days, me jumping on hoods of cars to try to get paid, me chasing the owners of the bars down to get paid, us going in and promising the people the world when we were just nothing but a basic band with 40 songs.
I remember playing the Omega. We were doing that gig every Thursday night. They had this Velvet Elvis poster behind us.
Elvis on velvet picture right in back of us.
The tuneless guitar, that had to be Mr. McAir.
Mixed guitar wouldn't stay in tune.
Mixed guitar was rarely in tune.
Can't get the guitar in tune.
After every song, it had to be tuned.
I mean, after every song, he was always retuning his guitar.
Every time you tuned it up and went down the neck, it pulled the spring up a little bit farther.
This guitar had an auto untuner.
Jim likes to talk about the time when Mick got so mad at him that he took his guitar off.
And he threw his guitar down.
Threw his guitar down one time.
Threw it down.
Just took it and just threw it down, let it drop on the stage.
And went, "Wrong."
He stormed out of the room. In a few minutes he came back, picked up the guitar.
He picked it up and it was in tune.
Picked it up and it was a perfect tune.
And then it was in perfect tuning.
And it was in tune. I don't know how that happened, but it really did happen.
So from that point on, we used to joke with him and tell him in between songs, instead of tuning his guitar, just throw it on the stage. I kind of let my girlfriends get in the way of the band, which, trust me, no one should ever do that. And I kind of went towards the love more than the band. And I ended up quitting.
Jimmy got fired. We fired Jim. Jim, you got fired a lot, man.
That was sad.
I think he had like 2 or 3 girlfriends going on at the same time, and he would miss practice because one of his girlfriends would say, hey, I need to do this and do that, and then he would run off with them. I can remember him leaving a rehearsal one time after he had just showed up because some girl called him up and, called Mark's house and was saying this and that and that and this, and next thing you know, he gets up from the drum kit and leaves, and it became sort of like a disciplinary problem.
Jim leaving was a disappointment. We really wanted him to stay. Al and I were working with him as much as we could, asking him to make rehearsals, and he kept missing rehearsals. He wouldn't practice the music. He would show up, if he did actually show up for any of the rehearsals, he really didn't know the music, which wound up taking time away, and which, of course, really didn't help the situation between he and Mick. That really actually started to elevate the problems. And it just got to the point where I guess Al and I don't recall exactly how we did this, but I think it was just Al and me. We're sitting at my house going over some of the music, just the 2 of us, and we just said, I think we got to get rid of Jim. This just isn't working. We got to get somebody that makes rehearsals and just can play. We were afraid he might not make gigs, which was it possibly could have happened because he seemed really caught up in other things. And one day we had a guy come over and he set up his drums. We started rehearsing and Jim didn't know about it, unfortunately. And Al was the one who went outside and just explained it to him, and he was pretty upset about it. And I never wanted him to think that we thought it was a joke or a gag. It was something we just said, we want to make something happen, and you just won't let it. You keep holding us back, and that's why it happened. So it wasn't out of meanness. It really was because he just wasn't doing what was required in a band. There are things you have to do. You got to sacrifice time, and you got to work, and you got to practice, and it's not just show up and play. It doesn't work that way.
Jimmy Hammonds got fired a lot. Simply because he was Jimmy. He would let his personal life just kind of take over. He was a great guy and all, but he let all these other things tie him up and take his focus away from the band. For as dedicated to this unit as Jimmy has been, early enough, and went on and he got older and he started seeing all these things. He's like, yeah, I'll fess up to that. I was, out doing this, or I was worried about that, or this. The earlier part of the Point Boys, even though it did mean a lot to him, that wasn't his priority. Mark and I really wanted to make a gel and work on harmonies and really get a show together and try to do it. And then just the focuses were in different places. And then we got another drummer, and then we replaced Mick. Mick was like not showing up, or I don't know what it was. Mick was doing something else, or something else was going on in his life. And then we got another guitar player. And then things started changing, and we were doing different stylings of music, and eventually we got actually to a progressive band sound with the Approach, and that's what it changed from the Point Boys to the Approach. We started doing like the '80s stuff. We were new age, new wave stuff.
I think maybe we just started losing interest. I think the thrill started to disappear, and we didn't know how to handle it. So we started to lose interest kind of fast. And that was probably part of the problem. Jim was already gone at that point. We had already replaced him with another drummer, and I think at that point maybe even Mick was gone. And Al and I were trying to keep it going, and trying to find these new musicians was virtually. I mean, the people that would show up for rehearsal to try out knew very little or just weren't interesting. And it was like the fun had all of a sudden gone, and it seemed like it started to become a business, and that was a shame, also.
And then I think they got another drummer, and they came back and they played a few shows, not many, but they played a few shows. Then me and Al never stopped talking. We always stayed in touch, and before I knew it, I was back in the band. And then I think we didn't really play that much after that as well, a few shows maybe. And then that whole era of the Point Boys kind of like ended. Just, it didn't fizzle, it just ended abrupt, just poof, done.
Jimmy would get the itch once in a while. He'd get his, like, instead of 7-year itch, it's like a 7-day itch. He'd want to get the Point Boys back together. Come on, Prego, time for the Point Boy reunion.
Next thing I know, the second version, what we call the second version, of the Point Boys was born, which was myself, Al, and Doug Ulrich. And at first, Doug Ulrich he's a keyboard player that's crossed over the tracks to playing bass, and he just practiced and practiced and practiced, and he got a lot better.
So I was making films and doing all this different thing with a friend of mine, Doug, and I was down in his basement one day, and I saw a bass, and I'm like, what's that? And it's like, yeah, I got a bass, and I'm like, I need a bass player. So, the bass player. Doug is a bass player now.
I knew Al from back in high school. We both went to Patterson High, graduated in the class of '83. We were in the same keyboard class, piano class together.
And I would consider him above average, but not great bass player. He just fit. We all got along.
Then, before you know it, Al started asking about like doing a band thing, and asked if I played bass because he saw I had a bass in the basement. And I was really more of a keyboard player, but I knew how to play some bass and a little bit of guitar. So I was like, yeah. So he says, I got a friend that's a drummer. He says, we used to play all the time, a band called the Point Boys. Would you like to get involved and go out and play some gigs? I was like, it'd be kind of neat.
So we got together with Jimmy and just started jamming, and then let's go book a gig. Who cares if you got the songs down? Who cares if you got everything tight? You just go book a gig, get out and play. That was the Point Boys. Just get on stage.
There's more joking around than seriousness. We never took it as a job. We always took it as having fun. So the three of us clicked. So I would have to say I enjoyed the first version of the Point Boys, but I think the second version had a lot more fun.
Eventually we picked up a guitar player, an older guy named Sonny.
Sonny showed up. I don't even remember exactly where we found him, or should I say he probably found us. And he came into the band, and he fit very well.
Sonny. Sonny was an older gentleman. He lived out by Route 7, and he did the song Sleepwalk, and that was kind of neat, and Boney Maroney and stuff like that.
The rest of us clicked so good. To bring an outsider in would be hard because of the friendship / relationship that the other band members had already established at that point. you're bringing an outsider in, and then they have to kind of play catch up. I don't know why he left the band, as I recall. I think we might have been playing a lot then, and he kind of wasn't into that. A little older gentleman, so we were a lot younger. I think a little age difference thing clicked.
But I think Sonny eventually got to the point where he just wasn't for him, and we goofed off too much or something at the gig or after the gig. So he kind of went his separate way.
You know, he was an older guy. He was older than us, and we played some places on North Point and stuff like that. And he hung in there for a little while. We just got, again, threw some people together, got gigs. It didn't matter if we had the people. It didn't matter if we had the songs. It didn't matter if we had anything. As long as we had a place to get up there and just like play, that's all it was. We actually got paid for rehearsals on stage all the time. We just like, it was all about getting up there and having fun. It wasn't about the music. It was about fun. It was Doug, Jimmy, and myself, and I had talked to Mark, I guess just to punish him or something like that, to come and join this version of the Point Boys and just do some of the old stuff we did, maybe throw some other stuff in and stuff like that. And then we started playing and, you know, playing out and having a good time and all. But again, it was like minimal rehearsal, maximal on stage time.
I brought Mark back into the picture, became a four-piece again, and that just added even more fun. And that's the thing. The Point Boys has never, ever been a job, never will be a job. It will never be taken serious.
Mark came back into the picture, one of the original Point Boys. And don't know exactly how he got back in, but I just remember him and Al talking, and then Al said, going to have Mark come down and get back in with the band. And
I called Al one day when I was going through a really low point in my life. I wasn't playing music. I really wasn't doing a whole lot of anything at the time. And I needed an outlet. And I'd given up music for several years because of something else going on at the time. And I thought maybe this would be something that would get me back into the swing of life. So I thought, let me try going back to the old band. You know, sometimes that helps when you go back to doing the things you used to do. And I called Al and he said, well, actually, I got a new guy, Doug, and yeah, I'm working with Jim again. And I kind of cringed when he said Jim. I thought, oh no, not that stuff again. He says, no. He says it's different now. He seems to be out of that old mood. I thought, great. So I went to his basement, and all the guys were there, and I brought one of my keyboards down and set up, and we went through some songs, and it sounded pretty good. And I thought, yeah, I think I can do this. I think I'm going to like this. So I stuck with it for, I think, at least a year.
And we had some fun times, but then it got to the point where just nothing was really going on, and I guess it got to a boiling point.
How that came to an end, I honestly don't remember. Again, I don't recall how exactly that time it came to an end.
You know, it was just tension was mounting, and it was like, you know, we're playing out, and, you know, Jimmy was doing his thing, and we were just like, you know, busting on him, and we'd give him a hard time.
And I remember that night there was not too many people there, just like a handful. And we were playing, and things were boiling, and Jimmy kind of goes through phases where he gets into little bumping heads with each band member. Everybody kind of takes a turn with them. And I remember that night it was basically Mark. Mark was kind of, I guess, fed up with Jimmy for some reason or another. Who knows?
I was the culprit between his girlfriend and me. We were making jokes with him about him behind his back, and he didn't take that too well.
Mark would be gesturing to his girlfriend, making fun of Jimmy, and Jimmy get all ticked off. And
I don't recall how exactly that time it came to an end.
Mark started making faces and stuff behind Jimmy's back, and Ginger was laughing her head off. And of course, Jimmy would look up and see her laughing and wonder what she was laughing at. And he would look quickly over at Mark, and of course, Mark would straighten out like nothing was happening. And then as soon as Jimmy looked away, he would do it again, and Jimmy started catching on what was going on, and he was getting pretty TO'd.
I don't recall.
Jimmy pretty much between songs made the statement that he was quitting the band, that after we finished this set, that he was packing his drums up and it was over with. So that pretty much ticked all of us off, especially me for some reason, because my belief is you don't quit in the middle of a gig. No matter if there's 4 or 5 people there or not, wait till the gig's over and then have your say and say, I quit, and go on your merry way.
And then, he did his whole drama queen thing, as he done a lot. And that was it, man.
He kind of bailed on us that night, and after that, we really didn't seem to try very hard to look for another drummer. We just sort of let it fall apart at that point. I don't know why.
All right, we were going to do it. We were going to give it one more go. We all get bored after a while. It's something like that. You always gravitate back to that familiar. And the Point Boys was familiar because it was a little bit of pain, a whole lot of fun. You didn't have to invest much, and you just had a good time. So we got together over Jimmy's dad's house in his garage.
Probably 6, 7 years after we played the last time, and somehow they got, let's try playing again. Well, we went over to Jimmy's dad's garage and set everything up, and Mark brought a friend.
But Mark invited a friend of his over to come and, let us hear him and him hear us, that kind of thing.
And it was the same old rehearsals. It was the same old battles. It was, oh boy, that was fun. My poor friend Joe, he walked out of there, and as we were riding home, he says, it's like a pack of vicious wolves in there. I didn't realize that we had that kind of an impact on people.
So we must have scared him off.
I think we practiced that second time, and that was basically nothing happened. There was nothing happening with it, so we kind of went our separate ways again.
There was a brief reunion with Mick in 2005.
Jimmy got a phone call about a party or something like that. If there was a party, if there was a show, if there was just like 10 people that would listen, there was a band.
But then we also had brought Mallory in as a female singer to bring some female vocals to the band.
And at the time, we decided not to call ourselves the Point Boys because there was a female in the band, and there was a little joke about the Point Boys plus one, and we were like, let's just make up a new band name and just go out and play and see where we go from there. So we wound up calling ourselves No Reply,
and we became No Reply because, of course, you can't make a female a Point Boy. That is a rule.
So Mick Ayers, we talked to Mick Ayers about coming and playing, and
there was always tension between me and Mick.
Yeah, matter of fact, I played with Jimmy, I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago. We had a good time.
And Mick is Mick. He's going to be loud, sing loud, he's going to play loud.
and it was interesting because right from the get-go, things just started clashing between Mick and Jimmy.
So Mick puts a chair and his amplifier in front of Jimmy's drum set, and Jimmy just hits the roof.
He and I bumped heads again,
and so it's like old times. Static, static, static.
and typical Mick showed up.
Jimmy Hammonds is one of the most consistent musicians I've ever known. Not because of his playing, not because of his showing up on time, not because of his remembering songs, but because of his attitude. His attitude is exactly the same almost over 20 years.
He showed up, he brought his guitar up on stage, he threw the case down, opened it up, banged into my drums.
And Mick at this time is really, really just like matured or whatever happened. And he was just like really trying to just downplay this, like, Jim, okay, Jim. And Jim is having a big hissy fit.
I'm not playing with Mick again. So it's either Mick is out or I'm out. And basically at that point, everybody was out because right after that, shortly after that is when we kind of like didn't break up, but we stopped playing. The farewell tour is basically my baby. Doug came up with the name.
Well, Jimmy Hammonds he's got a heart of gold. Jimmy Hammonds is just like the ultimate dude, at least in Dundalk. He allowed, at the Point Boys final world tour of the Point Boys, the last time you get a glimpse of the Point Boys, he allowed me to get married on that reunion tour. And it was just, hats off to you, Jim.
First, Al drops the big bomb on me, saying that he was getting married, and I was like, whoa, wow, he's actually going to do this.
There was a little joke Jimmy started talking about because I was going to do the videotaping of the wedding and reception. and Jimmy was going to do the DJing. And of course, Jimmy started joking around about the Point Boys playing like a set at the reception. It was just a joke. And then, of course, Jimmy obviously really wanted to have us get together for this.
I suggested to Doug, let's play a little joke. I was actually recruited to DJ the wedding. Doug was recruited to video the wedding, and Mark was recruited to play the keyboards. But I had told Doug, let's get there and tell Al, pull a joke on him, tell Al that we have the equipment in the car and that we're going to play, and just to get a reaction. Then I went a little further, and I said, why don't we just take the equipment and set it up? I have the most, being a drummer. I have to set more stuff up, but I'm willing to do it. Just bring an amp and a guitar. Mark, just bring a keyboard and a guitar. A keyboard and an amp. And let's set it up. Let's let him walk in and see this equipment set up.
And he thought, well, since we're going to be there and everything, we should try to get, like, surprise Al and then try to get him to come up on stage and play, like, maybe 10 songs or something. And at first I was like, yeah, that could be kind of neat if you can get Mark to do this. Maybe I'll do it. But then I started thinking, having second thoughts, thinking that could really blow up in our faces where you're going to put Al on the spot. He just gets married and he's got all his family and friends and his in-laws there at the reception. And then, bam, out of nowhere, we're hitting him with the surprise that we got our instruments and we're going to do a quick little reunion thing with the set. Jump up and play with us. And I thought, what happens if Al doesn't want to play? It could be very embarrassing.
This is the best part. I talked to Mark, and he agreed. I talked to Doug first. Doug agreed. Then I talked to Mark. Mark agreed. Then I called Al. They left it up to me to talk to Al. I said, Albert, can we play your wedding? No. I said, Al, let's play your wedding. He always tried to dodge things, which is typical Al. And he then told me, basically, if I can get Mark and Doug to play, that he would play. Needless to say, I had already talked to them and they agreed. He was beyond unaware of that. And he insisted that they were going to both disagree. So I let him go on his little journey of they're going to disagree, they're not going to play, it's not going to work, blah, blah, blah. And then I finally jumped the bottom and said, I've already talked to them, they both agreed.
I got a phone call a couple of days later and he said, hey, I think we're actually going to play that wedding. I said, no. And he said, yeah, what do you think?
Then we got together to practice. At first, me and Jimmy actually practiced together just by ourselves playing around. And me and him both had listened to the songs and practiced the songs and had them down decent. Mark actually knew the songs somewhat himself. And when we all got together, the first time it was me, Al, and Jimmy before Mark got a chance to practice with us. And we practiced and we sound kind of rough. And Al, first thing he said was, man, we sounded horrible. And then I said, no, we didn't sound horrible. You horrible. Me and Jimmy actually played the songs pretty properly. You were the one that didn't practice before or listen to the songs.
Oh, it's funny. As soon as the practices were started, just jumped right in. I didn't even practice the songs one time. They gave me a list, and of course I didn't get the disc from Jim to work on the music. So I knew what the songs were going to be anyway. But I walked in and I hadn't played any rock and roll bands for 3 years, and I came in and remembered just about everything. I couldn't believe it, and it just took off. It was really easy, and everybody, the three of us, it was Doug, myself, and Jim, and we went through the song list, and it was a piece of cake.
We did the smart thing. We asked everybody, and then
As much as it was like, no, it started forming and started becoming its own little thing, growing and growing. And things started fitting in, and there could be some really good things from this.
they could say that they don't want to do it. They could deny being a point boy. But no doubt in my mind, when the four of us play, it's I don't want to say the word magic, but for lack of a better word, it's something that's undescribable. It's just we click. And it just, once we get started, we don't want to stop. Usually we have to. We get shut down or something. But
Someone like Jim decided to hold on to something like this and breathe life into it whenever it was dying. And here it is, years later, and it's still something very important. and I'm glad that I was a part of it. I don't know why, but I'm glad I'm a part
I
of it.
think what probably sums the Point Boys up the most. It's where you go to hang out and be a kid again. Enjoy music for what it is.
And for some reason, some of us were talking about, doing a whole behind the scenes or behind the music thing of the Point Boys, and somehow it turned out to be this.
And I apologize to everyone.
Oh man, Jimmy leaving. That was sad. I really felt bad for him. Stop laughing.